Welcome back to Left in Kentucky. This is Roberto Henriquez,
And Dickerson.
and we are back for another episode. And glad you're with us. It's we were getting ready for this episode, and I asked Ann, I'm like, "What are we going to talk about?" Nothing's really happened lately. I mean,
Yeah.
there's nothing going on other than Ann has COVID, so there's that.
Oh, and I know there's people out there who have had it multiple times. Um, the one thing I will say is this: the first time that I had COVID was before the vaccines were even out. So
Right.
I started it I'll never forget, New Year's Eve, 2020, going into 2021.
Wow.
And was down for 10 days. Had a headache for the entire 10 days that wouldn't, nothing would touch it. And I kind of had mild, cold symptoms and all that kind of stuff. But the fatigue, the overwhelming fatigue and the
Mm,
headache were the two
right.
things that got me most. And then all the rest of my stuff was all crazy GI stuff. And
Right.
this is like literally 2.0. I mean, it's the exact same
Wow.
for me. The only difference is I'm up an atom faster. Like today's day 3, so I do feel better. But I have slept a lot.
Well,
I
good.
feel, yeah.
That's good.
Hopefully,
I,
I'll
I
come
mean,
out
you
of this
haven't.
zombie phase.
So we're recording this on Tuesday, January 28th. So, you really didn't miss anything while you were sleeping. Nothing happened today or yesterday. It was
Right.
the 27th and the 28th were completely blank news days.
Yeah.
There was no grab at power. There was no there was no call to suddenly stop federal funding for programs. There were no ice raids in northern Kentucky and greater Cincinnati. None of that happened.
Yeah. I tell you, none of my devices with the ability to give notifications would agree with you. It was like, even in my hazy sleep, I could still hear the ding, ding.
It it has literally been a nightmare. Today at work, we spent the entire day making red cards for folks to know what their rights are and that you do not have to talk to immigration officials. You have the right to remain silent. If they do not have a warrant, not just an administrative warrant, but an actual warrant, right? Because those are two different things.
Right,
And yeah, you do not have to react to an administrative warrant. It has to be an actual legal warrant
right,
and
from a judge.
from a judge.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that was my day at work today.
But that's so, I mean, for the average person, for the normal, Joe Schmo walking down the street, that's not a distinction that many people will make automatically or think to look for or ask. And, for someone whose, first language is not the English language, it's going to be that much more difficult for them.
Mhm.
Um, I
The
just,
nice thing
yeah.
is you can go if you go to the ACLU website, they have rights cards in multiple languages.
Oh, good.
Yeah, not just Spanish, but Hindi and Mandarin and a bunch of other languages that spell out your rights in your language that you speak, as well as your rights in English.
Good. Well, I mean, all we can do is, I think the most important role that we can play, one of the most important roles we can play, is to provide as much information as possible,
Mhm.
to not be, you know, at threat level 10 all the time,
Right.
and oh, hair on fire, with every single thing that comes down the pike, and they have plans in place. And I think one of the best things we can do, and we've talked about this in our in-person meetings, is having everyone find their focus, having
Hmm.
everyone have between one and no more, I would say no more than three issues or uh, committees or
Hmm.
whatever the case may be that they're tracking so that you
Right.
can focus to help prevent burnout and to help prevent misinformation from being spread, and to keep everyone informed, but knowing that this is going to be a long haul.
Yeah.
And so we need to um do the best we can with the outreach that we have, make sure that it's truthful, and activate, not jump to threat level 10 unless it's really there.
Right. And I think we had a good example of that yesterday, right? Because there was a number of immigration officials that were in Northern Kentucky and Greater Cincinnati starting yesterday. And there were reports coming in from everywhere. And it's like some of them were accurate, some of them were inaccurate. And I think pausing to take the time to go, okay, what is the source of this information? Let me make sure that this information is accurate before I echo that information.
Right. And the other thing too is I think it's important for people to know, if you come across something and you're not sure the validity, there are places where you can take that and say, "Hey, has anybody heard about this? Can I get some help finding out if this is in fact true information or not, because I don't want to spread it, but I don't want to sit on it either." There
Right.
are places you can go. I mean, there are private groups on social media. There are, many avenues to get messages to people who have, broader networks or what have you. Those are the kinds of things that we need to maintain and stay on top of.
Absolutely. Um,
I've done it myself.
yeah.
Where, I mean, I had information come to me and I was like, "Are you sure?" And the person was like, "Well, I think so." And so, I'm like, that's not good enough for me, but I'll take it to somewhere where I know there are people that are more well connected in this particular area.
Right.
And so I took it somewhere else to find out. And it did take a little bit of time, a couple hours maybe, but
Mhm.
at least it was confirmed that the information that I was being told was false. So I'm glad I didn't go out there publicly with it, you know. Um, that's that's all we can do. I mean, we know this playbook. We've been here before, where this is intentional chaos.
Mhm.
It's the same thing when Trump took office the first time, where he was throwing, they threw everything
But
at
it
us that
seems
they
it
could.
it seems much more intense this time. I
I
mean,
I do agree with that.
yeah.
Steve Bannon is all over the place, praising what's going on because this was his plan. I
Hmm.
mean, here we are in 2.0, and they are still carrying out Steve Bannon's plan. And the
Right.
whole time he was like, just, we're going to shove all of this out there. And while they're wagging the tail over here, we're going to be working actually on this over here. And they drown us with so much noise and minutia and
Right.
shock value, and they mix it all together, and you're shaking your head going, which way do we look?
Right.
Um,
And I think what we're seeing that now, right? It's like, yeah, there's serious stuff going on with ICE raids and
right.
setting up block roadblocks and checking people and going to places. That's a real thing. It is actually happening right now. But I think that's the distraction from the cutting off federal funding to programs, right? Everybody, everybody's talking about the ICE raids and they're focusing on that. And then we get this, oh yeah, by the way, we're pulling funding for, Meals on Wheels and whatever until you can prove that you are living up to the horrific ideals of this administration.
Right. And even that, I mean, there's chaos within the chaos when it comes to that particular issue of what happened with that executive order cutting off federal funding through that's supposed to take effect was supposed to take effect at 5 o'clock,
Hmm.
right? Which was just
5 p.m. today.
20 minutes ago. So, depending on where you look, you have people that are like, um, this is all accurate, this is true, and they're taking action. Then you have other people who are like, no, no, that's not true. It's just da da da. It's very hard, even for people who are deeply concerned and who want to do something, to figure out what's real and what's not, because the information is just overwhelming
Hmm.
and scattered across the United States between who has which bit of information where. And
Right.
so it's hard to pull it all together. I mean, we do have the Democratic senators did have a press conference about this, and at 5 o'clock, right, 20 minutes ago tonight, there was a protest in Washington D.C. over this issue. And I think there's two reasons. One is that um, there's a question as to the constitutionality of this,
Right.
and the
Because Congress has responsibility for funds, not the executive.
right. And the funding that's out there now has already been allocated. It's already been, approved in the previous budget bill. We're
Right.
going to X amount of money to each state for these programs and yada, 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 yada. So that all happened before Trump became president. It would be one thing if he was coming in and saying, okay, we're going to put a halt to any new funding across the board
Right.
until we look into these programs and determine where we want to go. But that's not what
But
he
this
did.
this is funding that was allocated in 2024
Right,
before he was inaugurated.
right, right. So, there's a group of state attorneys general who have come together and already filed suit over this. Um, you know, some people are saying, oh, well, it doesn't apply to like SNAP, which would be, food stamp benefits. It doesn't apply to Medicaid, which would be a medical card. Trying to get all the terminology so people know which things we're talking about. It doesn't. Some say it doesn't apply to Pell Grants, this, that, and the other thing. However, I've also had people communicate with me who either work in the government or receive some of these benefits where, people receiving financial aid got emails today saying your status is being reevaluated. And
Wow.
what does that mean? That doesn't sound to me like that's not affected at all, right? I mean,
Right.
we don't know what the outcome is going to be. The same for Medicaid. At one point today, the Medicaid portals for all 50 states was interrupted. They were not necessarily all at once, but at various times. Some of them are back up and running, some of them are still down. We
Right.
don't know heads or tails from that.
Because
So it's
everybody's concerned about what's happening. So they're like,
right.
yeah.
Well, not only that, but if they weren't going to be affected at all, why, if those programs were never intended to be affected, why are all their websites going
Yeah.
haywire?
Now, I will say, I literally just got a text as we're talking. A U.S. judge has temporarily blocked the pause in federal grant loans and other financial assistance from taking effect.
Good.
That just came in as we're talking.
Well, and as I will say this too, as we've seen, I think a lot of these next 4 years, the courts are going to be crucial.
Hmm.
Crucial. Because we have seen even those who were appointed by Trump during his first term,
Hmm.
who have put their foot down at the Constitution line. You
Well,
know,
and
that
in the
not
birthright
all, but some.
the birthright citizenship one, that was a judge that was actually placed by Ronald Reagan
Right, right,
that said, no, this is the most unconstitutional thing I've ever seen. This cannot stand. It has no merit.
right. I, I mean, this is why I doubled my monthly contribution to the ACLU.
This is why I doubled my monthly drinking bill.
I just, there's, I think there's two things that we really need to protect and watch for. One is the courts.
Mhm.
Two is the fourth estate. We
Yeah,
have to fight for the free press, but we have to fight for those who are willing to report the facts and not capitulate, right?
right.
When we have the billionaire class that's involved in owning so many of these publications, for example, um, Jeff Bezos, what was it? The LA Times
Was it the LA Times?
was one of the papers in California, I think.
Yeah,
Um, that capitulated to Trump not wanting something about the endorsement, right? They stopped the endorsement because Jeff Bezos came down from on high and said, "Nah, we ain't doing that." And there were several publications that we saw do that, which is why we saw journalists leaving the Atlantic and people canceling their Washington Post subscriptions and things like
Jeff
that.
Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post.
Is that what it was?
Yeah, Bezos
There
owns
was
the
one in
Washington Post.
there's one in California too that was involved. I don't know.
Okay.
Anyway, my point being, we have to continually fight to have the free press. And then with our attention span, with our dollars, that's how we determine which ones are successful based on which ones appear to us as being the most forthcoming with the truth.
Mhm.
In lieu of that, I have become a fan of Substack real fast.
Substack is really good source for information.
It is. There's a lot of writing there. There's a lot of independent writing there,
Hmm.
independent thinkers, which I really appreciate. And I didn't realize that it's almost kind of like an X or Blue Sky or Twitter in its formatting.
Yeah,
In
kind
terms of
of.
being in terms of being able to post things and being used
Right.
as a social media site.
But it's more
However,
in depth.
it is more in depth, and I like it
Yeah.
because you get to choose, like, do you just want to make a regular short, quick post, or do you really want to write something? And it,
Right.
puts everything into this format where you're basically writing an article off the top of your head and just putting it out there in the public space. I really, really like that.
Yeah, I'm with you. I've really enjoyed getting involved in Substack and really kind of digging into it. And I mean, don't get me wrong, there's some crap out there too, but there's some really nice in-depth articles and long form stuff that I think we've gotten away from, unfortunately, for the 27 words or the 30 words or whatever,
Right.
as opposed to more of the in-depth journalism and investigative stuff. And that's
Agreed.
what I'm finding more of on Substack, that
Ah,
investigative,
yes,
deep
yes,
thinking
yes.
stuff.
I agree. I agree. I like it a lot. There's a couple that I'm following in particular. One for national, well, I follow a lot, but two that I want to point out that I follow for one for state level stuff and one for national level stuff.
Hmm.
For state level stuff, it's Olivia Krauss, who is now working, as an independent journalist.
Right.
And she does phenomenal in-depth work on what's going on in the legislature and laying out the over 300 bills that are out there now. And that's called the Gallery Pass is her publication on that you can
Gallery
follow.
pass. Nice.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, isn't that cute?
Yeah.
Anyway, and the other one is I can't think of the name of it now. It's with Jennifer Rubin, who I really picked up on. Here it is. Picked up on the first Trump presidency, and it's called The Contrarian, which I like,
Yes. I
which I
follow
like
the
too.
contrarian. I like that
Yes.
one.
Those are right now my two favorites. I mean, I follow quite a few on there, but those are my two favorites. And
Yeah.
um so anyway, and there's a thing out today by one of my other favorite people to follow since the beginning of Trump version 1, who is Paul Krugman, the economist. He's got a new piece out today in the Contrarian. So, um, I think it's important that we share information and who we're following, who we like, why we like them, what they do, things of that nature, and try really hard not to get all caught up in the drama. Although, I'm the first one to admit I have my moments.
Right. Well, I think one thing that's interesting, right? I listened to um the podcast from oh crap.
It's one of those days.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those days. From Pod Save
My
America.
Yes, I've
And
been listening too.
yeah, and one of the things that they've talked about is rather than focusing on what is said, um, focus on what is done
Right.
and things that are actually happening, actions. And that's, I mean, I'm kind of trying to absorb that and be like, okay, whatever the Orange Menace says, whatever, that's a thing. But then the actions, okay, blocking federal funding for grants and stuff, that's an actual thing that's happening.
Right.
That's not just something that's being said. And I think that is starting to help me filter out some of the just noise that's out there.
Yes. Well, and let's face it, it's all terrible.
Hmm.
There's no good news here. None. You
No.
know, the stock market's taking a hit. Eggs are triple the price that they were when he came into office.
So I have a friend lives in California,
Uh-huh.
and they keep posting about egg prices out in California. Just a standard dozen of eggs, nothing special, not none of the free range, none of that. Just grade A large eggs, a
Right.
dozen of them, $9.20 a dozen.
Right. Right. I mean, the point has to be hammered from now until, the end of his term. This is what he claimed he was going to do. He's had 8 days and he's done everything but,
Yeah,
you know,
we're only a week into this.
I know it's day 8. My God. My God. I mean, we have over 1,400 days left to go.
Yeah.
I think my headache just got worse. um, so yeah, there's just so much, and
Yeah.
yet that's what they want. They want us to feel overwhelmed. They want us to go, my gosh, it's
Yeah.
and not just day by day, hour by hour. It's just
Right.
this constant what's happening. And spin, the spin is phenomenal in
Yeah.
terms of what they claim happened with Colombia and the president of Colombia and the immigrants and migrants that they were trying to send back
Yep.
versus what actually happened, according to multiple sources, the difference is insane.
Yeah.
Insane. Um, the cost, I mean, Trump is spending money hand over fist, and nothing has been done to curb spending until
No.
you get to today, and all of a sudden it's like, well, we're just not going to spend any money, we're just going to cut everybody off. Well,
Well, no,
what?
we're gonna spend money on deporting people.
Well, deporting people and getting that billionaire tax cut,
Right.
making sure that that stays in effect. I mean, my God. Even Republicans, though, are some are pushing back, even if it's in very limited ways.
Yeah.
Um, so we have to uplift those efforts no matter what.
Right.
In my opinion, you know, praise, champion, reach out. I know people hate phone calls. They hate them.
Yep.
They were, got
I
burnt out on
hate
them.
phone calls.
Right, got burnt out on them the first time around. But it is the most effective way to communicate and to get things done. And we have proof that it worked, right? The first time around. When we shut down the DC switchboard because so many people were angry and calling in, these are the kinds of things that it's going to take. I mean,
Yeah.
Republicans who get no phone calls have no reason to believe that they're going to be hurt by capitulating to what Trump is trying to do, regardless of whether or not it's constitutional.
Hmm.
And for my money, I think that is the best argument to be had. Because how many times have we heard Thomas Massey, Rand Paul, and others talk about, oh, they're a constitutional Republican? Not if you're supporting this BS, you're not.
Nope.
He's wanting to change the 14th Amendment. They've
Right.
already got they want to go to court to challenge the wording of the 14th Amendment and what it meant or what it should mean. That's and you've got Lindsey Graham. Oh my God, what
Oh,
happened?
that guy.
I mean,
Bless his heart.
I just when it comes to all of them, Rand Paul, Lindsey Graham, Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, all of these people who called Trump everything but a white man during when he ran the first time, who are the first ones to drop trowel and do the kissing. I mean, it's like, what is going on? Lindsey Graham is actually out there saying that he thinks Trump is going to win the argument on the 14th Amendment and that he's going to be successful in ending birthright citizenship. The
That's
scary part, the scary part about that is, considering what our SCOTUS is made up of right now,
it's possible.
it's it's possible. I mean, now the lower courts are like, oh hell no,
Right.
the lower courts,
But they're going to take it to SCOTUS. You know they're going to take
right?
it to
That's the whole
SCOTUS.
point. That's why it was stacked the way that it was,
Right.
and people need to remember this.
Yeah.
Um,
One of the thing I heard today was the description that Trump is both the arsonist and the firefighter.
oh, definitely,
And I was like,
definitely,
that is a perfect description.
yes, it is.
He creates a disaster and then he's like, oh, look, I fixed the disaster. The whole
Right.
thing with Columbia,
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
that was a perfect example of, oh, look, I created a disaster and I fixed it. So now give me credit for fixing it.
Right, but he goes even a
That's like
step.
that's like me going, me at the stoplight and somebody's in the crosswalk and is like, I chose not to drive over you with my car, so I saved your life. You should thank me.
Love it. Love it. Only they went further and tried to say that, he's such a strong leader that the president of Colombia
Back down.
backed down. No, 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 no. That ain't the way that went down.
Yeah.
Uh-uh. And so it's like, wow. I, it was just so nice to breathe for 4 years.
Breathing is over.
Right. But I refuse to do what we did. It's not the same as last time. I think a couple things. Last time it seemed like we were at level 10
Hmm.
almost daily. At least when we first got started and things were there was so much shock value. We didn't know what to expect.
Right.
Whereas this time around, yes, we lived through it. However, there's a difference between acknowledging that and thinking that, well, we lived through it the first time, so we don't need to worry this time. I think it's the exact opposite. Um, I think it's worse this time,
Hmm.
but we need to be better about picking and choosing our battles. And when we decide to choose a battle, how we respond to that
Yep.
is very important. You know, um, we've talked about protests. It
Hmm.
That has to be reserved for that level 10, hair on fire.
Right.
We need all doors open, everybody out, you know,
And there needs
millions in the streets, not tens.
Right. And there needs to be a purpose, an outcome.
Right,
What is the outcome of this protest? What do we
right.
want to achieve? Not just screaming to the sky and being together. And I mean, not that those are necessarily negative things, but we're past that point in this resistance.
Yes, 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 yes. 100% agree. So for now, it's what we know works. It's what we know gets attention, which is why call your senators,
Hmm.
call your congressperson, let them know who you are, that you're their constituent, that you disagree with um, the overreach of power, with the unconstitutionality of what's happening, and that you expect your senators and congressperson, regardless of party, to put a stop to it.
Even if my senator is Mitch McConnell and Rand Paul.
Yeah. And you need to call them on the fact that they have continuously beat the drum that of all the titles that they give themselves, one of them is constitutional Republican. If you believe in the Constitution, if you know, they should be fighting this. They should be standing up to him and not, bowing down. When they
Absolutely.
take their oath of office, they take an oath to the Constitution. They don't take an oath to a president. They don't take an oath to a presidential agenda. They take an oath to the Constitution, and they need to stick to that.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree. And I mean, I get it. It's tough. It's tough. We live here in Northern Kentucky and Mitch McConnell and Rand Paul are our senators and Thomas Massey is our congressman and it fucking sucks. But if we shut down the if I mean if we flood them with calls saying, support the Constitution. You claim yourself as a constitutional Republican or a constitutional independent or constitutional libertarian.
Right,
Defend the fucking Constitution. You're all about the First Amendment. Well, what about the 14th Amendment? That's an amendment too to the Constitution.
right, right. I agree. And I think it's the best argument that anyone has. You can ideological differences aren't going to get us anywhere.
No.
Just being able to call and say, I don't agree with this. we have a legitimate complaint here, no matter what party you're
Hmm.
from. In that constitutional argument, in the separation of powers argument,
Hmm.
in the power of the purse lies with the Congress argument. All
Hmm.
of those things are legitimate arguments that have nothing to do with any kind of agenda or ideology.
No, exactly. It's not partisan. This is a constitutional issue.
Right,
If you support the Constitution, there's no argument where you should be on this.
right.
None.
Well,
So,
could have, should be, and are in our world right now are two very different things.
right. But I think I mean, some of the other things, right? Like a lot of the things we support and we push are policy based things that are, that do have a gray line and do have an argument point of, well, it's kind of this or it could be this, or how do you feel about this? How much should government be involved? How much should government not be involved? But these are very clear, just it's a constitutional issue, and this is what the Constitution says, and no.
Right. And if it weren't, we wouldn't have judges stepping in to put temporary stays on things until the court has more time to address it. I mean,
Right. And
it,
these are judges who have been approved by Ronald Reagan. These are judges who have been approved by Donald Trump. I mean, these aren't like, left whatever that people like to say, I mean, these are conservative judges that are
yeah,
putting stays on these.
yeah, yeah. Totally. However, and that kind of circles back to the courts, the courts, the courts.
Uh-huh.
I mean, because the same with them, they take an oath to uphold, you know, state constitutions, the U.S. Constitution, things of that nature. They don't take an oath to support any one leader or agenda. Um, Although Mike Johnson is out there saying that it's all about supporting the president's agenda.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, as if you're like somebody that if Mike Johnson is your congressman, I don't know how you sit with that. How do you sit with that and be like, he doesn't represent me, he represents the president?
Yeah, uh,
I mean, right? I mean,
well, and the other thing, one of the other big issues that's come up in this first 8 days is this whole attack on FEMA,
mhm,
which is just hilarious in a very maudlin way. Um, where Trump is now saying that, maybe they should just get rid of it. Okay, so let's look at the theater part of this. It is explicitly stated as part of Project 2025 that getting rid of FEMA is one of their agenda items. So for Trump to come out and be like, we're going to be looking at this, there needs to be a lot of changes. Maybe we'll just get rid of it. Well, guess what they really want to do? They really want to get rid of it and
mhm.
leave states to their own devices. The problem is, lo and behold, one of the, number one takers, users of federal money
Red states.
for disaster relief in the United States, lo and behold, is Mike Johnson's own Louisiana.
Yep.
The hell is he going to do? You're going to
I
leave
mean,
states like, and then you've got like, um,
it's Louisiana, it's Texas, it's Mississippi, it's Florida, it's Alabama. I mean,
North
it's
Carolina.
North Carolina. I mean, it is like they get the most benefit out of
Right,
FEMA.
right, Right. But look at the state of Kentucky. Although we are not typically big users of FEMA resources,
Yeah,
you know,
unfortunately, the last several
right.
years
I
we've had
mean,
between the
one
floods in Appalachia and then the tornadoes in Bowling Green and
COVID. I
yeah,
mean, Andy Bashir's first term was just racked with one thing after the other after the other. And there are still, to this day, how many years later, people both in Appalachia and in Western Kentucky, whether affected by the floods or by the tornadoes, who are still getting assistance through FEMA dollars
yep.
to, have their homes rebuilt or whatever, their business or whatever the case may be. I mean, getting rid of FEMA and letting the states fend for themselves. I mean,
Individual states do not have those kind of resources.
California does.
But just California, because it's what the fifth largest economy in the world if it was a
I think it's
country.
up to the fourth now.
Fourth, I mean, but that's the exception to the rule in the United States.
Right, and you're right. And I mean, look at Kentucky again, and try to tie it back and bring it home as many times as I can. Even without FEMA dollars, Kentucky is one of the poorest states in the country.
Hmm.
We take way more federal dollars than we put in,
Yep.
which is something that none of the state legislators want to point out. Um, we would be hurting. We would be hurting if that money went away.
Oh yeah. We'd be we'd be in a mess. I mean, it would be a nightmare if that money was taken away.
Oh yeah. Or, even if other funding maintained, but there was another disaster, another whopping tornado or huge amount of flooding.
And there will be. I mean, there will
Right.
be. It just happened.
It's inevitable.
Right.
Then what would Kentucky do? You know, we have the Republican supermajority that is so. I mean, they're like horses running in the Derby with the blinders on, right? They have one goal
Yep.
and one goal only, and that is to make Kentucky a zero uh, state income tax state, right? That's what they want. That's what they've been driving towards
I
ever
thought that
since
I
Matt
thought
Bevin was in office.
I thought their goal was to protect Damon Thayer's horses.
Well,
I'm just
he
saying.
he's not there anymore, so I don't know
No, but
where his
I still think that's their goal.
that could be part of it, but they're not doing enough on the other side of the coin. I mean, they're reducing revenue for the
Yep.
state and they're not doing anything to bring in more.
Nope.
And the second part of that is I'm kind of glad we transitioned over to the state here is that the new report came out on the public school system in
Hmm.
Kentucky, which now has a $4 million shortfall. Now here you have the supermajority claiming, and they've done this for the last year or two, which I find absolutely freaking hysterical, mind you. And this is one of those things that people like Marianne Proctor likes to scream from the
Oh,
rooftops.
jeez.
I know. Is that, oh, well, we've spent more money on public education than we ever had. It's record spending. I don't give a shit if it's record spending if it's not up to the level that it's supposed to be. And that's the problem,
Yep.
right? The problem is that they have shorted it for so freaking long then it doesn't matter if they increase how much they give if it's not up to the levels meant for 2024, 2025. It's
Right.
still short. So it was always going to come to be
We need
that
we
there was
need
a gap.
We need 30 million. Well, we gave you 15 million, and that's more than we've ever given you. Well,
Right,
okay. I still need 15 million fucking dollars to get the job done.
right.
Yes, I mean, just because you've given the most money that you've ever given before doesn't mean that you've given enough money to actually pay the bills we freaking owe.
Exactly. Exactly. So, what they're going to do with that, I don't know. And then I think I showed you earlier the bill that is now in the legislature that will finally get rid of all forms of slavery in Kentucky.
I think we should have more discussion about that.
I it is 2025, and to find out, I mean, because I readily admit I did not know this. I would not have thought to look for this,
Uh-huh.
but the fact that there is a tiny well, it doesn't matter if big or small, but there is an aspect of slavery in the state of Kentucky that is legal. And it's just like, one of your record
Yeah.
record scratch.
Scratch. What?
Right, right. So, and that is that it is legal to use prisoners
Hmm.
it, like that are, I guess, that are indebted, so kind of like debtors prisons.
Right.
And that, but how does that
Yeah, I don't know how that's even still a thing.
I just, it makes me want to cry.
But apparently it is in Kentucky, so
Right? I mean, it's we talked before about how long it took to get rid of bestiality, and even that's limited.
I was gonna say
And
that's limited, so
raising the age of marriage that parents can sign their daughters away. And now here we are in 2025 dealing with slavery. I just
I really want to find somebody who argues against this bill.
right? I want to be standing in the
Yeah,
gallery so that
yeah,
the minute that the doors open and we can come out, we get our hands on the person and get them on
yeah,
audio.
exactly.
Explain this to me like I'm five.
Yeah.
What?
Explain to me why you argued against outlawing all forms of slavery.
Right. I
I told you, man. It's just, the alcohol bill just keeps going up and up this year.
I don't know. As far as, kind of going back and forth here, on the state level, that's really the biggest thing that I've heard. I mean, it's been quiet since
Yeah.
we're doing this
We're in the
weird,
break now.
well, we're in the first break
Right.
because they actually have a second big break. I mean,
Right.
the way that they've divided it up this year is really bizarre to me.
Right.
Um, so, but that's the biggest thing on that's come out on my radar at the state level.
Yep.
As far as back looking at the federal level, protecting people is my number one concern. Making
Yep.
sure that people are safe, doing
Yep.
whatever we can, whenever we can. Whether that's providing meals, blankets, rides, whatever, we can do those kinds of things.
Hmm.
Making phone calls, it takes less than 3 minutes. It's something every single person can do.
Yep.
It's painless. Nobody's going to yell at you for calling. They're going to take your message, thank you, goodbye. Even if they don't mean it, they're
Right.
still going to take your message, thank you, and goodbye, because legally those things have to be recorded. And that's
Exactly.
another reason to do it,
Yeah.
is to keep these records of citizen concern big.
Mhm. And I
Um,
think that's important for people to understand. It's like nobody's going to argue with you.
right,
Nobody's
right,
going to
right.
be like, "Oh, I can't believe you think that," or "I can't believe you would say that," or
Right.
they're
And no matter how angry you are, there's no reason for you to express that anger to the person answering the phone because they have no power. They're
Right.
just doing their job, taking a damn message.
Right.
So there's no reason to get angry with them. You can express your anger, but do it with kindness towards the person taking the message.
Yeah. Limit it to the issue and say, this is how I feel about the issue. This is where I live. You give them your zip code. That allows them to tie you to the appropriate senator or congressman.
Right.
And it's like, this is what I want my senator and congressman to know, that I live in their district and I feel that this issue needs to be handled this way. You
Yes. Well, and like I said, even if you don't know an issue well, knowing the difference between presidential powers and congressional powers,
know. Hmm.
and even judicial powers,
Hmm.
because we're never going to have enough time, days, or alcohol to cover Eileen Cannon and the ways that she's
Oh
broken
God.
judicial power, right?
Yeah.
Um,
MG,
so
MGP does not have enough alcohol to deal with that one.
so I mean, these are the things. We can still be kind, decent human beings. It doesn't take a book to tell us how to be kind, decent human beings. Um, and dealing with people and get our message across. We can still be angry, but we just got to make sure we direct it in the right way.
Yep. Absolutely. I agree. All right. So I think that's going to kind of wrap up what we've got this week. I'm sure next week will be just as quiet as this past week has been,
Well,
week two.
all right. Well, a couple of things. Because I had to cancel the meeting this past weekend because of the COVID.
Hmm.
Sorry.
Our
It's
in-person meeting.
Yeah, it's been rescheduled for Wednesday, February the 5th, from 6 to 8 at the Kenton County Library in Covington on Scott Street.
All right. Cool.
Okay. And then next week we have Drew Lawrence as our special guest coming in to
Yay.
talk about healthcare.
That's awesome. Looking forward to that.
Me too.
Healthcare is another issue where there's no real controversy and no real issues. We have great healthcare that everybody has access to.
Right. And we have all this forthcoming knowledge too, with all of the websites being shut down and
Exactly.
leaving the WHO.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm sure Drew will have a few things to say.
Probably. I think you're probably right. They may have a comment or two about that.
Right? Jeez.
All right.
What a time to be in medical school.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, folks. So, if you want to get hooked up with a particular group or something, if you're, particularly interested in bills either at the state or federal level, if you're interested in immigration issues, reach out to us. We will help hook you up with the appropriate resource. Just in case you're wondering, we try not to broadcast those resources just to provide them a little bit of protection. Because if we mention certain resources, they will get inundated with a lot of bots and negative activity. But if you're interested in getting hooked up with any of those, please reach out to us. Our email address is
Info at indivisiblenky.com.
And you can email us that. You can also reach out to us on social media. We're available on Blue Sky and um,
Blue,
YouTube
yeah,
and
Instagram,
Instagram,
Facebook,
Facebook.
X.
Are we still on X?
Yeah, I'm maintaining a presence there
Okay,
because it doesn't do us any good, in my opinion, to stay in an echo chamber
that's fair.
any more than them. I mean, we've got to maintain it. You can be a quiet presence. You don't have to, you know, but just to see what's being said.
That's fair. That's fair. So feel free to reach out to us on any of those platforms, and we thank you for listening. Make
Always.
make sure you recommend our show to other folks. Spread the word, and we will talk to you next week. Until then, this is Roberto Henriquez.
and Dickerson.
Thanks for listening. Have a good one, guys.
Bye.